Labour prioritised the LGBTQ vote, and which alienated the Pacific Islander vote.
Yes, it did.
And it was all because of a rugby player.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is what led to the shite. I am reasonably satisfied now, having done a booth-by-booth analysis in 2 of the seats that Labour lost and 1 seat that it very nearly lost, or a Queensland seat that it very nearly lost. Seats with a very significant concentration of Pacific Islander voters. And, I mean, you won't know what they are. You won't know what they are. Pacific Islanders are people from, sort of Vanuatu, Cook Islands, New Zealand, Hawaii, Tonga, Fiji. There are lots and lots and lots of them in Australia, going back over 100 years. Pacific Islanders were brought often forcibly to Australia in the 19th century to cut sugarcane, and they were referred to, this is quite a vulgar word in Australia now, but it's historically accurate, they were referred to as Kanakas, and they were a form of indentured labour. So there is a significant going back.
See, I don't know that word, but I am now worried that Helen has just dropped the N-bomb on our show.
Oh, yeah.
No.
We're gonna get demonetized forever.
What you're getting now is just me getting what I used to call as a teacher SBS, which is sweaty back syndrome.
Not sweaty bum syndrome.
No, sweaty back, where you can just feel the sweat trickle down your...
Let's not explore that. It's not a pleasant image for anybody.
But yeah,
so you haven't dropped the N-bomb, but...
No, but that was the term that used to be used. It's not used now, and it's not as rude as the N-bomb, and there are certainly ruder words in Australia than that.
I can believe that.
You do have a reputation.
Which precedes you.
Australia has a significant Pacific Islander population, and the Pacific Islands, the missionaries who went there, were almost uniquely successful compared to everywhere else in the world. And they're a mixture of Pentecostal, Presbyterian, Methodist, uniting, sort of all different varieties of Protestant. They're not Catholic, they're all varieties of Protestant. And they're quite traditionally conservative and religious. And they have this very similar moral values to Muslims, except, as I've pointed out to a few people, except they're completely monogamous, obviously, because that's part of Christianity. And Israel Folau, who was the rugby player in question, put up on his Instagram a homophobic, I don't do Instagram except for pictures of my cat, so I'm not really sure how it works, a homophobic meme, basically, that among other things said that gay people were going to go to hell. And of course, he is the best rugby player in Australia. He is a multi-millionaire from being a rugby player. He's enormously gifted. And this caused an enormous stink because he'd violated Rugby Australia's social media policy. And so there was this ongoing and enormous stink that just dragged on and on and on. Because you know how these sporting bodies, they have their own internal requirements in terms of dispute resolution and so on and so forth, and then you can go through the courts, and then you can go through an employment tribunal and all of this kind of thing. And all the different stages of this over a conservative Christian rugby player was just going on at the same time as the election campaign. And an organisation called the Australian Christian Lobby did what I used to do for my senator when I was working for him, did private polling about the effect of the treatment of Israel Folau was having, not only among Pacific Islanders, but just among Christians more generally. And it soon became clear that even many people who were not particularly Christian were looking at it from the perspective of proud sports people. Australia is a proud sporting nation, has got a significant sporting heritage. It's taken very seriously in the country, and Australians are very good at sport, and the country wins numbers of Olympic medals out of all proportion to its tiny population, every Olympics and all of this kind of thing. So a lot of people were just looking at the Israel Folau situation and going, this is to do with his ability to play rugby. How? And why do you even care? And even a couple of other people who were either sort of ex-Wallabies and ex-Waratahs, which is his state side, New South Wales Waratahs, were saying, it's not just Israel Folau, you'll have to get rid of every Pacific Islander in the Australian rugby team because that's what they're all like. They just don't necessarily stick it on their Instagram, but that's what they all think. They're conservative Christians. Are you going to get rid of all of the Pacific Islanders out of the Australian rugby team? And if you do, isn't that a bit racist? Because it's the same argument that you have with Islam over here. If you start picking on people for having really, really conservative religious views, and most of those people are Muslim, and most of those people are brown, you mightn't mean it, but it can start to have a racial effect. In Australia, it's Pacific Islanders. If you start chucking every Pacific Islander out of the rugby team for having conservative religious views,
you're going to lose every game for the next 10 years.
Basically you might as well say, we surrender to New Zealand because the All Blacks are going to walk all over us. You might as well say that. But you're getting rid of all of the brown players in your team, and you finish up with a team of only white players. And
which some people in Australia probably would be quite
but no matter how you dress that up, it's going to look bad.
So a lot of people, what you're saying is a lot of people felt that what we might call the progressive left had gone too far in the way that Israel was dealt with.
Yes.
And as a consequence of that,
in some electorates, it transferred. I'm reasonably satisfied now, having done a booth-by-booth analysis, that it transferred into votes for the coalition, or at least preferences to the coalition. They might have put number one for, a local, for a protest party, and there's lots of those, but their preferences flowed to the coalition.